Okay, this is a bit of an explanation time on sand casting and some of the difficulties that you actually strike. The easiest way to sort of explain this on why some of the casting that I've been doing is coming out quite rough is essentially all these sort of parts that you're looking at, anything like this, and around the eyes and the nose, all those sort of details and everything else. If you think about it like a sand castle, if you're trying to build a sandcastle with a bucket, wherever you've got overhang or underhang, depending on which way you want to look at it, the sand can grip in. So those places generally you can't have the slightest amount of area where the sand will bite in together and allow it to actually hang on to it. So those areas basically need to be filled in, if you like, okay, so that they don't bite. It's quite simply not that the sand can't pick up this sort of detail, it can. It's the fact that you've got to be able to get that piece of sand out of that section. And if you're in a situation, as you mentioned, if you're pressing the sand down that way, that's fine, but then if you try to get it out that way whilst lifting it out that way, it's obviously not going to come out. So that's where you've noticed I've actually chopped this guy, or made up a pattern version based on this guy, which allows to actually have those separate details. So you're picking up the face section that way, okay, is basically that guy there, okay, and then the skull part, because this dome section has to be hollow on the inside to account for weight and the amount of metal that you're actually using, I've split that into two separate parts. Now the idea with that is that you pack in a core section in here, kind of like you sort of turn it into like a football sort of shape, and then remove the two halves to actually expose the core, and then the core is actually sat in once you've packed around the top part of the actual mould, or pattern I should say, to make the mould. The pieces here on the side are the same sort of thing. There's a lot of this detail in some ways I could have left in, but because I then have to actually marry this piece up to the existing original piece, so that's the piece in metal, I have to marry that up, allowing for the fact that you've got metal shrinkage and all those sort of things and everything else. These parts need to be made actually a little bit larger than what they actually are in reality, so that when they're cleaned up and sanded back and everything else, they'll actually fit as a snug, neat fit in there. So there's lots of jigsaw puzzle sort of elements to it. The loss of detail that you get is a trade-off, if you like, for the amount of detail that you can actually get in the actual sand casting. There are different ways that you can do it. You can actually get core sands and that sort of stuff that are made from shell sand and finer grade, and individually cast up a core piece for that, and then place it in and around your mould area. But what that effectively means is that you need extra equipment that I don't really have in this sort of setup. So the trade-off with that is that I'm losing detail in the sand in gaining quickness, if you like, in how quickly I do these sort of moulds. The other thing that you could do is you could actually make up something like that made from either wax or polystyrene or something like that, and then bury it in a sand sort of process and actually burn out the polystyrene. The other thing you could do is actually make up a wax mould of something like that. With wax moulding you can basically do really as much detail as you like, because the idea with that is that once you have all the pieces made up in wax, you then paint it with a ceramic slurry, which is a mixture of ceramic and sand. You put several coats on that to build up the actual thickness of it. Once that's done, you actually bake the ceramic mould, which allows the wax to sort of melt from it and run out. It all flows out, leaves you with a hollow shell. Once that shell is actually still red hot, you then introduce the molten aluminium or steel or brass or whatever it might be into that mould, and that gives you the perfect sort of detail and everything else that I'm sort of lacking with this sort of technique. The trade-off with that is that if you don't get it absolutely perfect and the mould cracks or something goes wrong, you've lost your wax mould and you have to start the process all over again.